Whispers in the Overlook, a tale of isolation and madness. The harsh winter wind howled outside the Overlook Hotel, its icy fingers seeking entry through every crack and crevice. Jack Torrance stood at the expansive window of the Colorado Lounge, watching as the first heavy flakes of snow began to fall. In a matter of hours, the windy mountain road that led to the hotel would be impassable. He, his wife Wendy, and their young son Danny would be completely cut off from the outside world until spring. Jack took a deep breath, trying to quell the mixture of excitement and apprehension that churned in his gut. This was his chance, he told himself. A chance to prove to Wendy that he could be responsible, that he could provide for his family, a chance to finally finish his play, free from the distractions of the outside world, and most importantly, a chance to stay sober. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, grimacing as he caught sight of his reflection in the window. The man staring back at him looked older than his 30 years, his eyes shadowed by the ghosts of past mistakes. But that was all behind him now. This winter at the Overlook would be a fresh start. "Daddy?" Jack turned to see Danny standing in the doorway, his small face pinched with worry. At 5 years old, Danny was an unusually perceptive child, often seeming to know things he shouldn't. It was uncanny, and if Jack was honest with himself, a little unnerving. "What's up, Doc?" Jack forced a smile, using the nickname that usually made Danny grin. This time, however, the boy's expression remained serious. "The hotel is awake," Danny said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It knows we're here." A chill ran down Jack's spine, one that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature outside. Before he could respond, Wendy's voice called out from the kitchen. "Danny, Jack, dinner's ready." The moment broken, Danny turned and scampered towards the smell of cooking food. Jack lingered for a moment, his eyes drawn back to the window. For a split second, he could have sworn he saw a figure standing in the snow, watching the hotel. But when he blinked, there was nothing there but the steadily falling snow. Shaking his head, Jack made his way to the kitchen. It was just his imagination, he told himself. The isolation was already getting to him, and they'd only been here a few days. He needed to get a grip. The first few weeks passed uneventfully. Jack fell into a routine, spending his mornings checking the hotel's boiler and other systems, his afternoons working on his play, and his evenings with Wendy and Danny. The hotel was eerily quiet, the vast empty spaces seeming to absorb sound like a sponge. It was during one of his afternoon writing sessions that Jack first noticed something odd. He had been staring at his typewriter, struggling to find the right words, when he heard what sounded like music coming from the Colorado Lounge. Faint strains of a jazz tune, accompanied by the murmur of conversation and laughter. Frowning, Jack got up from his desk and made his way to the lounge. As he approached, the sounds grew louder, more distinct. He could almost make out individual voices, the clink of glasses, the shuffle of dancing feet. But when he stepped into the room, it was empty and silent. Jack stood in the center of the room, his heart pounding. He could have sworn. But no, it was impossible. They were alone in the hotel. It must have been the wind, he told himself. The old building creaking and settling. Nothing more. But as he turned to leave, his eye caught something in the large mirror behind the bar. For just a moment, he saw the lounge as it must have been in its heyday, filled with elegantly dressed people. A band playing on the small stage, bartenders in crisp white jackets serving drinks. And there, in the center of it all, was Jack himself, dressed in a vintage bartender's uniform, mixing a martini with a wide smile on his face. Jack blinked, and the vision was gone. He stumbled back to his room, his mind reeling. He needed a drink. God, how he needed a drink. But no, he had promised Wendy. Promised Danny. He couldn't go back to that, not now. Instead, he threw himself into his writing with renewed vigor, trying to drown out the echoes of phantom music that seemed to linger in his ears. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, strange occurrences became more frequent. Danny spoke of a woman in one of the rooms, her flesh rotting in a bathtub. Wendy swore she heard the sound of a party coming from the ballroom, only to find it empty. And Jack found himself drawn more and more to the Colorado Lounge, to the bar that stood silent and fully stocked. It was there that he met Lloyd for the first time. Jack had been sitting at the bar, his fingers itching for a glass, when suddenly the bartender was there. Lloyd was impeccably dressed in a red jacket, his face impassive as he asked, "What'll it be, Mir? Torrance?" Jack knew he should be shocked, should question the man's presence. But all he felt was relief. "God, Lloyd," he said, his voice cracking. "I'd give my godden's soul for a drink." Lloyd smiled, a cold, mirthless expression. "Your credit's good here, Mr. Torrance." And with that, he poured a glass of bourbon and set it in front of Jack. The first sip was like coming home. The burn of the alcohol, the warmth, spreading through his body, it was everything he had been missing. As he drank, Lloyd listened patiently to Jack's troubles. His failed career, his strained marriage, the constant temptation of the bottle. And as Jack talked, the lounge seemed to come alive around him, filling with the ghostly patrons of decades past. It was Wendy who found him hours later, passed out at the bar. But when she shook him awake, confused and angry, the bottles behind the bar were untouched. There was no sign that Lloyd had ever been there. As winter tightened its grip on the overlook, the line between reality and nightmare began to blur. Danny's shining, his psychic abilities grew stronger, bringing with it terrifying visions. He saw twin girls in blood-soaked dresses, their voices echoing in unison, "Come play with us, Danny. Forever and ever and ever." He felt the malevolent presence of the hotel, pressing in on him, hungry and patient. Wendy, torn between her concern for Danny and her fear of Jack's increasingly erratic behavior, tried to hold the family together, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The hotel seemed to watch their every move, its empty corridors filled with whispers and shadows. For Jack, the descent into madness was both gradual and sudden. The hotel spoke to him, showing him visions of the past, of previous caretakers who had succumbed to its influence. It promised him greatness, importance, if only he would do one small thing: take care of his family, correct them, as other caretakers had corrected theirs. The turning point came on a bitter cold night in December. Jack had been in the basement, checking the boiler, when he came across a scrapbook. Its yellowed pages were filled with newspaper clippings, detailing the Overlook's sordid history, murders, suicides, disappearances. As he read, Jack felt the hotel's presence more strongly than ever, whispering in his ear, showing him visions of power and eternal life. When he finally emerged from the basement, hours later, Jack was a changed man. His eyes gleamed with a manic light, his movements jerky and unpredictable. Wendy and Danny, huddled together in the caretaker's apartment, knew instinctively that something had shifted. The Jack they knew was gone, replaced by something that wore his face, but was not him. From that point on, the Overlook's malevolent influence grew stronger by the day. The topiary animals in the snow-covered playground seemed to move when no one was looking, their branches scraping against windows in the night. Room 217, which Danny had been warned never to enter, called to the boy with a siren's song of terror and fascination. And everywhere, the ghosts of the hotel's past mingled with the living, their boundaries becoming increasingly blurred. Jack spent more and more time in the Colorado Lounge, drinking ghostly alcohol and conversing with long-dead guests. He saw himself as the hotel's chosen one, destined to become a part of its dark history. All he had to do was prove his loyalty, prove that he was willing to do anything for the Overlook. Wendy and Danny, meanwhile, clung to each other for support. Danny's shining brought him visions of horror, blood-soaked walls, screaming faces, and always, the rotting woman from room 217, pursuing him through the hotel's endless corridors. Wendy, her maternal instincts on high alert, tried to protect her son, while grappling with the terrifying realization that her husband was slipping away from them. The climax came on a howling, snowbound night in January. Jack, fully in the grip of the hotel's madness, finally snapped, armed with a roque mallet he had found in the groundskeeper's shed. He began to hunt his family through the labyrinthine halls of the Overlook. Wendy and Danny fled in terror, the hotel itself seeming to shift and change around them to aid Jack in his pursuit. Doors that should have been unlocked were suddenly impassable. Corridors stretched endlessly, leading them in circles. And all the while, the ghosts of the Overlook cheered Jack on, urging him to correct his family as so many caretakers had done before. In a heart-stopping chase through the hedge maze outside the hotel, Danny managed to outsmart his father, leaving him to freeze in the sub-zero temperatures. Wendy, battered but alive, reunited with her son, and together they escaped the Overlook in the hotel's old snowmobile. As they made their way down the mountain, they looked back to see the Overlook engulfed in flames. The boiler, neglected in Jack's madness, had finally exploded. The great hotel burned against the night sky, taking with it all its ghosts, its horrors, and the man who had once been Jack Torrance. In the years that followed, Wendy and Danny tried to rebuild their lives. But the shadow of the Overlook loomed large. Danny's shining continued to bring him visions, though less frequently as he grew older. Wendy found herself jumping at shadows, always half expecting to see Jack's manic grin lurking in dark corners. And sometimes on cold winter nights when the wind howled outside their windows, they both could have sworn they heard the faint strains of music, the clink of glasses and distant, echoing laughter. The Overlook Hotel might have burned, but its essence lived on in their memories and nightmares. As for Jack Torrance, his fate remained a mystery. Had he perished in the hedge maze, or in the hotel's fiery demise? Or had he, as the Overlook had promised, become a part of the hotel's eternal history, doomed to relive his winter of madness for all time? In the end, the true horror of the Overlook Hotel lay not in its ghostly inhabitants or supernatural occurrences, but in its ability to twist the human mind. It had taken Jack Torrance, a flawed but loving father struggling with his demons, and turned him into a monster. It had nearly destroyed a family, feeding off their fear and pain. The Overlook stood as a testament to the darkness that can lurk in isolated places, and in the hidden corners of the human psyche. It was a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves, born from our weaknesses, our fears, and our deepest, darkest desires. As Danny grew into adulthood, he often found himself thinking back to that winter at the Overlook. He wondered about the nature of evil, about the thin line between sanity and madness, and he wondered, with a chill that never quite left him, if somewhere out there, in some spectral plane, the Overlook Hotel still stood, still waited, still hungered. For in the world of the Overlook, death was not the end. It was merely a doorway to a different kind of existence. And somewhere in that ghostly realm, perhaps Jack Torrance still roamed the endless corridors forever. The caretaker, forever bound to the hotel that had claimed his soul. The story of the Overlook Hotel and the Torrance family served as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous hauntings are not those of ghostly apparitions, but of the unresolved traumas and weaknesses within ourselves. In the end, the true horror lies not in what goes bump in the night, but in the capacity for darkness that resides within the human heart.